Hello, welcome to our week on climate change. You know, weather is a universal unifier. When we catch up with friends, we commiserate on the sweltering heat, the incessant rain, the increased frequency of tornado events, etc., etc. We even comment on longer-term climate shifts. I know I've said, "It seemed to have had more snow in North Carolina when I was a kid." Today, however, when we hear about glaciers melting or a catastrophic hurricane, we are forced to think about man's impact on our planet. And as much as weather has historically been a unifier, the term climate change has become a divider, at least in our country, often polarized by politics. In the rest of the world, however, this division is largely absent, and there is universal acceptance of the dangers and possible consequences of climate change. Disaster managers across the globe have been grappling with planning for the consequences for some time now. And today I'm going to touch on a few examples and the disaster management issues they raise. We're going to have to go to the field to be able to do that, though. So follow me. Brazil is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate changes in the world because of its invaluable biodiversity. This is according to Carlos Nobra of their Center for Weather Forecasting and Climate Studies. A large degree of this is attributed to their vast rainforest. Tropical forests pull out of the air and hold nearly half of all the carbon that is present in vegetation in the entire world. When these forests are burned for fuel or to clear land, the CO2 is released into the atmosphere. Brazil's National Institute for Amazon Research estimates that deforestation puts 4 times more carbon in the atmosphere than the entire nation's burning of fossil fuel does. You know, rainforests also cool the climate. Their leaves and canopy trap moisture and kind of allow it to evaporate more slowly, kind of an air conditioning effect, if you will, for nature. When it's burned to the ground, hotter, drier conditions can set in. The 20% of the Amazonian rainforest that has been destroyed is believed to contribute largely to the terrible drought that struck Brazil back in 2005. Let's take a look at the banks of the mighty Amazon River during the drought, the worst in a century. In many places in the country, it was even worse than we see here. What did this mean to the population? People were forced to use foot and bicycle traffic to actually traverse what was once faster canoe and boat lanes of rivers. Many villages were at a loss for food, medicine, and fuel as a result. Aid organizations were forced to assist. Here we are in Kenya, a land that is everywhere parched. Droughts have affected millions in a vast area stretching across Kenya, Somalia, Ethiopia, the Sudan, Chad, and even into Burkina Faso and Mali. Whole towns are now desperate for water. Food prices have doubled across Kenya. A 20-liter jerry can of poor quality water has quadrupled in price. Big game from the nearby national parks, very popular there, of course, and the reserves there, are dying in large numbers. And electricity has to have, and it's been rationed, affecting both gasoline and food supplies, obviously. Hunger has also escalated violence around the country. What has happened, according to a climate change advisor with Ireland-based charity Concern Worldwide, is the latest of many interwoven ecological disasters, which have resulted from deforestation, overgrazing, the extraction of far too much water from the earth, and massive population growth. All of these kind of go hand in hand. The same organization reports signs of climate change, all of which are confirmed by the Kenyan Meteorological Office and local governments. The frequency of heat waves is increasing. temperatures are generally more extreme, water is evaporating faster, and the wells are drying. Larger areas are being affected by droughts, and flooding is now much more serious. Again, this is being replicated across many areas of the continent. Water is, of course, another critical issue related to this. It is projected that by the year 2020, up to 250 million people in Africa will be stressed by dwindling water supplies. This is a potential global crisis. Welcome to Bangkok in Thailand. Bangkok is a popular international destination, but also one of the places that is in risk of disappearing due to climate change. Sources indicate that the city is already sinking due to its too heavy urbanization, on its too soft underground, as well as the excessive pumping of groundwater to support the city. The location also makes the city exposed to floods, especially in the monsoon season. However, this is being compounded by climate change's impact on the city. The recent Bangkok Assessment Report on Climate Change indicates that the impacts of climate change on the city are likely to be quite severe, including major flooding due to Bangkok's low elevation, problems of water supply, provision, and contamination, air pollution, and oppressive heat with its associated health consequences, increases in infectious diseases, and also a decrease in actual biomass production. Well, we're somewhere in the Arctic. I'm not exactly sure where. You know, the Arctic is one of the fastest warming regions of the world, making it a good early warning signal for what climate change may cause in other regions. For several decades, surface air temperatures in the Arctic have warmed at approximately twice the global rate. In both polar regions, climate change will likely lead to decreases in habitat, including sea ice, for migratory birds and mammals, with major implications for other predators such as seals and polar bears. Reproductive success in polar bears, for example, has declined, resulting in a drop in body condition, which unfortunately in turn is due to melting Arctic sea ice. Without ice, polar bears cannot hunt their favorite prey, which are seals. The dramatic impacts of climate change in the polar regions, like ice and snowmelt and permafrost warming, will have many global effects, such as sea level rise, which we'll discuss later. Climate change will also particularly affect the lives of the people in the Arctic, who really depend on that environment for activities like hunting, fishing, and reindeer herding. Let's go somewhere warmer. Well, here we are in Kiribati. Kiribati is a small island in the middle of the Pacific, and we're here to talk about the problem of sea level rise. Bear with me while I'm driving around here. The two major causes of global sea level rise are thermal expansion of the oceans, water expands as it warms, and the loss of land-based ice due to increased melting. Primary impacts of sea level rise, as it relates to disaster management anyway, are inundation and shoreline recession, increased flooding from severe weather events, saltwater contamination of groundwater and water supplies, and elevated water tables as well. The three primary means of adaptation to sea level rise can either be protection, physical retreat, and also accommodation. Let's go to a short video while I'm driving to explain the problem here and kind of see what adaptation is actually occurring here.
The South Pacific nation of Kiribati straddles the equator. A collection of low-lying coral islands, Kiribati has a total land area about the size of New York City. It is the only country in the world that occupies all 4 hemispheres of the globe. It is in the middle of nowhere and at the centre of everything, including the climate change crisis. Kiribati is a country under siege. From the outside, where the rising seas and storm surges induced by climate change are sapping the already precious land. And from within, by an exploding, impoverished population.
Nature cannot be stopped. Nature is still doing its work, which to my own view, to my own personal feeling, I feel sad for my own people.
The people of Kiribati are deeply religious, and their beliefs do not easily accommodate either birth control nor the science of climate change. Here, on the main atoll of South Tarawa, some 50,000 people are crammed into 16 square kilometres with very little infrastructure. And as the seas flood South Tarawa, so do new arrivals. People are leaving the tiny outer islands of Kiribati as the seas invade and as land and job opportunities shrink. Many are coming to already hopelessly overcrowded Tarawa. But it will not be the receding land that eventually drives people from Kiribati. More likely, it will be the shortage and pollution of its fresh water supplies. Drinking water here is contained in shallow basins of fresh water, called lenses, that collect beneath the atolls. Now South Tarawa is under imminent threat of catastrophic water pollution and a cholera outbreak, because hundreds of squatters are living on the ground directly above the last fresh water supply. Only about 1/3 of the houses on Tarawa have a toilet. Most people still have to wade into the sea or onto the beach every day to conduct the most basic of human functions.
It's one of the things that is from the olden days that we normally use that because there's not that many people then, but now there is. It's a big issue.
Kiribati, its leaders believe they have 30 to 50 years to seriously reduce their population, or face the prospect of a largely uninhabitable country. Their government is now actively encouraging its most able citizens to leave. Under a policy called Migration with Dignity, people are being encouraged to learn skills which will gain them employment and new lives.
If our people had survived, then they would have to migrate. And in order to do that, either we can wait for the time when we have to move people en masse, or we can prepare them from beginning from now so that they would be prepared to migrate even from now as educated people, as skilled people, to be able to migrate to the new communities, to be worthwhile, to be able to make a contribution to the new communities, and absolutely above all else, with dignity.
Kiribati hopes to export more aged care workers to Europe, seafarers to German boats, and tradesmen to Australia and New Zealand. Yet these are a proud people. Here, extended family is at the core of life. The young still care for elderly. Nights are alive with the sound of chatter, singing, and sports matches. Most don't want to leave their atolls, but their choices are evaporating as fast as their land and fresh water.
Still driving. More than half of the world's population currently lives in a coastal region. The United Nations Environmental Program predicts that by 2010, about 80% of the world population will be living somewhere between or within 62 miles of the coast, and of those, 40% will live within 37 miles of the coast. Although a 3 to 4 millimeter per year rise in global mean sea level sounds small, encroaching oceans have already consumed 2 small uninhabited islands of Kiribati in the Central Pacific. They are also threatening the existence of other low-lying nations, especially islands in the equatorial regions. Tuvalu's population is quickly trying to adapt, for example, to a sea level rise of 5.7 millimeter per year. What we are talking about here is mass migration of populations due to sea level rise. Wholesale and partial relocation of populations living in severely affected areas such as Tuvalu, Bangladesh, and Samoa has already created climate change refugees, as they are called. Other nations are having to grapple with these refugees coming to their nation states. Other areas where populations may need to be relocated include Bangladesh, the Maldives, Guyana, and the Netherlands. Might be a good time to visit Amsterdam.